Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Go Fast, Grow Fast, where we talk with founders and fractionals about growing revenue and what is working and what isn't working, just as importantly. We're talking to somebody a little bit different today. I'll let Dan introduce himself, but I am very excited about getting into this conversation. Thanks for being here, Dan.
Yeah, thanks for having me. So my name is Dan Lorenc. I'm the co-founder and CEO of a cybersecurity startup named ChainGuard. We're about 2.5 years old now as a company. We just raised our Series B last fall. Before that, myself, my co-founders, all worked at Google for 8 or 9 years in engineering, product, developer tooling, infrastructure. So all coming from a very engineering-focused background and learning all of this marketing and sales stuff as we go.
Yeah, that's great. But, before diving into some of the other stuff, what was it like going from being a Google engineer to, a founder?
Yeah, I never plan on this. People ask me the story all the time. My co-founder, Matt, our CTO, I worked with him for years and years and years at Google on all sorts of projects. He took a bunch of time off during the pandemic and was just learning how to barbecue, smoke meats, that kind of, typical stereotypical
important
thing.
life essentials.
Yeah, I kept trying to get him to come back to work. A bunch of the projects we're working on are getting exciting. The space we're in cybersecurity is called supply chain security, and it got super hot all of a sudden. There was a really huge breach on a company called SolarWinds that affected the U.S. government. There was an executive order from the president about this, and so the space was heating up. And I kept trying to get him to come back to work, and he kept saying no. And he'd send me pictures of another cookbook or another brisket he had just made. And then one day, finally, he said he was ready to work again, but instead of coming back, we should do a startup instead. And so I said, oh, that does sound like a good idea. So basically quit my job pretty much right after that, figured out how to start a company. We got started in October of 2021, which later realized was the easiest time to raise venture capital in the history of the world. That was like the peak of the 2021, post-COVID bubble that everyone was in. So it was a lot easier to get started then than we thought. But then, 5 or 6 months later, when the markets kind of reversed and venture capital pulled away, we were met pretty quickly with the pullback effect there.
Yes.
And realized how hard it was supposed to be that whole time.
This is what it's actually like to raise money.
Yeah. So got to go through both sides there. But yeah, much easier than I thought it'd be at first. And then we got met with reality pretty quickly.
Yeah, no, that's a wild time to be starting a company. Can you, share a little bit more with in the weeds of what your company actually does? Give people an idea of who it is you're actually selling to and what it is you're selling.
Yeah, so software supply chain security as a field, I'll try to explain it a little bit. Like cybersecurity is really good at protecting endpoints, protecting infrastructure, all of this stuff. But what we've recently learned as an industry is that attacks can happen anywhere in the software development lifecycle. And the better we get at some areas of security, attackers aren't lazy. They're smart. They are lazy, but they're smart people. They just move to the next easiest point. And so supply chain security is really about securing the way developers consume open source code, build their own code, deploy that to production, all the steps along the way before it ends up in that secure environment that most of the traditional cybersecurity industry is protecting. So it's a pretty new field, and we focus on that open source piece. So open source software. Really hard to explain why it works, but it does. Somebody gave me a quote today that I'll just reuse. And it's really good this works in practice because it never would in theory. Nobody can explain why, but 90 to 98% of the source code that people use and build their applications on top of is for free. It's just available on the internet that somebody else decided to write and give away for free. And that's great. There's so much out there, and it enables us as an industry to move so much faster. But at the end of the day, it can be written by anyone on the internet. That's awesome. That's why there's so much of it. But anybody that spends more than 10 minutes on a social media site realizes that not everyone on the internet is a nice person, and there's some really terrible people out there. And so that's the scary part and the flip side to this that we're now facing as an industry. How to actually consume all that open source code, which is great. It's everywhere now because it's so easy to use. How do you get a handle on that? How do you fix the security issues that are in there? How do you hold that to the same standard that you're holding the rest of your infrastructure to? And it's hard when you're not paying anyone for it. You can't just go ask them to make improvements.
Yeah.
So that's sort of where we sit. So we sell, it's kind of an interesting sales motion too. The buyers are pretty much always CISOs or security teams. But because of the nature of software development, the end users are usually developers. They're the ones that have to change their workflows. They're the ones that have to change the way that they do their jobs in order to do it more securely. So we really try to thread this balance of making a product that CISOs want and need to buy, but their development teams aren't going to hate and throw pitchforks at them when they tell them they have to roll this new thing out in production.
Yep. I find, of everybody that you could possibly be selling a product to, technical people are one of the hardest people to
Yes.
sell anything to. They hate
Yes.
being sold to.
Yes. Developers hate buying things. I'm a former
Yeah.
developer. Yeah. Developers hate spending money. They want to do it all themselves, even though they hate doing the work themselves, but they just hate the idea of paying someone else to write code for them because they can write code. Yeah, and it's led to like weird dynamics inside of companies. Like developers have very little budget because they ask for very little budget, but it means they can't really affect purchasing that much. Developers can really easily slam the brakes on a purchasing decision, but they have no gas pedal. There's no way they can make a deal go faster. They have no budget. But yeah, if a CISO is putting a budget request in, the last thing they want to do is buy something that never gets used because the developers hate it so much. And so that's kind of where you can tread that balance and get deals done anyway.
Right. Yeah. So with that in mind, you know, how have you guys gone to market? You know, how do you approach the people that don't want to buy your product?
Yeah. Well, you have to find a really, really, really painful pain point that developers actually really, really hate to do, but that someone really has to do. Security, it's a really hard industry to stand out in. It's a really hard industry to market and to differentiate yourself in because all the security products, right? I'm going to RSA next week. We're recording this before RSA, but I'm going to be at the RSA conference next week where there's 500 plus booths. You can listen to a talk from every single one and they'll tell you how their product will meaningfully improve your security. And they're not wrong, but CISOs' times are limited, their budgets are limited. And how do you rise to the top there? It's just like people psychology in general, right? It's always easier to sell painkillers than it is to sell vitamins. Even if you know something is good in the long run, they already have so many other fires that you have to be ready to put out one of those big 3 fires if you're going to get something done. Even if you're pitching the most impressive security thing in the world, that's just not a current pain point, you're not going to get any interest.
Right. Yeah. So how did you... Well, first off, how did you identify that you guys were actually doing that? You were solving the right pain point?
Yeah, we tried everything wrong at first. You know, we were trying to do the proactive stuff that everyone knew was good long term, and eventually kind of just got pulled into this space. People always like to say compliance is not security, and it's not. But if you do it right, compliance is a good tool for security teams to get budget and to get things prioritized because it's really easy to point to something and say, we actually have to do this because this document from the government says we do. And if you can align to that stuff while you're actually meaningfully improving security, that goes a long way.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's great. So, okay, so you identify a pain point and, you know, regulations are always a great way to you know, do that. That's really good. So the next step becomes, how do you actually get your product in front of CISOs? You know, were you one of the lucky few where you just knew all the CISOs because, you know, that's who you are? Or how'd that come about?
No, not at all. So I don't come really from a security background, and my background's all engineering, kind of figured the security stuff out as we go. But yeah, the CISO community is really, really tightly knit, right? Everybody's in it together, even at competing companies. Everyone's protecting against the same threats. So there's this really good team mentality that CISOs have. Some of that's probably because of short job tenure that CISOs are kind of famous for. But no, it's a really tight-knit network. And once you figure it out and once you really understand them, it's pretty easy to get going. But you know, some of the non-traditional stuff I think we tried. Early on, I mentioned, you know, the 2022 bubble kind of bursting. You know, we had a bunch of products, we had a bunch of ideas, but, you know, everybody could tell with layoffs happening, budget cuts, there wasn't going to be much in terms of actual sales that whole first year. So we took probably, you know, everyone told us it was risky at the time and hard to actually pay off, but it did in our case. And it was really just focusing on super, super, super top of funnel awareness, corporate marketing, branding, PR, that kind of stuff, which is really easy to do for a startup, actually, if you're paying attention and you can move quick. And that got our name out there and that got our name known to the point where, you know, once a couple CISOs know you and once people recognize your name from newspaper articles and that kind of thing, that it's a much easier conversation to have, especially in a hot space. You know, so we did stuff like a new story would break, a new leak or a new data breach or something like that. And reporters, like, they want to write stories. That's what they do. And they want to write stories on the hot stuff and they want to talk to experts. I've been at big companies, right? I was at Google. It would take weeks to get quotes like that approved to go into a newspaper article or something like that. But if you come up with an interesting take on something and send it to reporters, like, there's a good chance they're going to cover it in their story and want to talk to you and want to keep talking to you. If you do that enough, then now all of a sudden they start reaching out to you for your take on things that are happening that you might not even have heard about yet. And that worked. You know, our goal was to really end that year. 2022 is the most widely known company, even though there were a new one starting almost every month in our space. And it paid off. You know, our name got out there. We talked to CISOs. They've heard about us from some coverage, from some magazine, from some newspaper, from some online publication. And once you get that name recognition, once you get those relationships built up, it all kind of forms this flywheel that just keeps going because you get called into more and more and more important stuff.
All right. So there's a couple things I want to touch on there. So
Sure.
first thing is, so you at a high level, you took an opposite approach of what a lot of founders default to, which a lot of founders are, I'm going to tackle the bottom of the funnel. Like, I want to go be in a sales conversation right now. Like, that's what I need to do. You went opposite end of the funnel, super high level. What was it, the situation you're in, or like what gave you the confidence that that was the right thing to do? Like, what, and how did you even think to do that in the first place? Because that's not where most people default to.
Yeah, it was somewhat confidence and somewhat necessity, right? Nobody had any budget in 2022. We tried the sales conversations and just layoffs, like the team, like we had a whole bunch of POVs that we got super excited about. And then the next day, the entire team we met was gone because of layoffs, that kind of thing. And so it was somewhat like, well, we know we're not going to make any, actually close any deals this year. No one is. It's just not happening right now. So let's just try to establish ourselves as the expert in the space and be ready when it all rebounds in 2023 and 2024, like we saw.
Yeah. So knowing that you had enough resources to actually survive the year, that helps.
Stay lean. Don't spend tons of money. Don't spend tons of money on marketing. It's not going to pay off yet. Don't spend tons of money on a huge sales team that's not going to pay off yet. So just invest in product and really be the experts in the space.
Yeah. No. So, okay. So that's great. And then part two is, so even the founders that, they want the bottom of the funnel. Yeah. That idea of, we got cited in a New York Times article or Washington Post or whatever trade magazine is really big in your industry. Like, oh, that sounds great. Yeah, I want that. Yeah. And then the default is like, well, who's the PR person I can hire to get that done? And then they realize, oh, that's $20,000 a month. Like, what? Yeah. So I'm assuming you didn't go hire a PR agency to tackle this.
We did eventually, but you don't need one, I would say, especially if you have a modest following, especially in your community, and there's interesting stuff happening. You don't really need one.
So how did you get started? And then how did you eventually decide that now it's time to get an agency to like help professionalize this?
Yeah, when it was working, basically we brought on an agency. But no, one of our early marketing hires had a background in comms and everything like that, and she helped and knew the right people to talk to and help you get started that way. But if you have a modest following at all, like it's crazy. After some event, I'll just go write a whole Twitter thread about it. And then 3 days later, my Google alerts will pop up because like my Twitter stuff will just get cited by reporters and everything. Same for LinkedIn. LinkedIn's even better for that. So you don't even really need to do outreach if you have enough of a following and you get enough reporters and people following you after getting it right early on. So it's really important to not like try to turn it, and this is probably a mistake a lot of people make, like, you can't just go pitch your product like, shamelessly in every single one of these. Like, you've got to be commenting on things that are relevant to the whole industry, even if it doesn't align, maybe even if it's in, contradiction to your product. You just really want, like, if the strategy is to just be known as an expert in the industry, which pays off later because people want to buy products from people they trust, then you've got to be authentic in that messaging. You've got to be tempered a bit, and you like shamelessly pitching your own product, even if it does solve all those problems you're talking about. That's not a marketing strategy. It's really an awareness one.
Yeah. So going into the year of, no sales, where you're deciding we're going to focus on top of funnel, when you say, modest following, like where were you kind of starting out? Like
I started at 0.
Like 0, right? Okay.
Yeah, I started at basically 0 and then worked from there. We hired a social media manager early on too, and she helped me get it going. She helped me learn what works on these platforms, the whole engagement baiting stuff, all those kind of things you see people doing. They do it because it works. People love that. The biggest thing, I kind of use that word authenticity early on, but that's really what people connect to. I think, one of my best LinkedIn posts ever was I just took a picture of my desk and posted that. And it was just books, papers, everything everywhere. Didn't clean anything up. And that one just blew up. People loved that. They were horrified by it. But, like that kind of thing works. Everybody starts sending their desk pictures. Like,
That's great. That's really good. And that's very encouraging, because that's like, we all start at that 0 at some point, like there's a few of us, you get lucky, you happened into something and you exploded, but that's not the rule. That's the exception.
I just wish I started all of this earlier, so it came in with even more of it. But you can build it up. You just have to do it.
Yeah. No. And what channels were you primarily focused on?
We tried a lot early on. I started on Twitter just because that's what I had, and that worked really well in 2022, 2023. We tried TikTok, we tried all sorts of stuff, but Twitter did the best for us. And then after the whole acquisition, a bunch of people started moving off of Twitter. I couldn't keep up with Mastodon and Blue Sky and all of those things. So I just went to LinkedIn and started trying the same stuff on LinkedIn. And that worked even better. So again, I wish I just started on LinkedIn years earlier. But LinkedIn's been one of the best for us. Same content, you can write longer form stuff. It gets treated more seriously than Twitter. There's still room for both. We do memes. Memes have been huge for us in marketing.
Yeah.
People love the memes. You post those on Twitter, copy some to LinkedIn, figure out how the algorithm works. But it's just content, just getting it out there is the biggest one.
Yeah. So, on LinkedIn and, I'm seeing a lot of people having great success on LinkedIn. Some people are even saying, LinkedIn's dead, it's too saturated now. And that's, I think that couldn't be further from the truth. With this top of funnel stuff, is it actually driving inbound leads?
Yeah. We're finally starting to transition to more traditional marketing, outbound, that kind of thing. But almost all of our revenue growth last year, still a huge portion of it is inbound just from that. People adding me on LinkedIn, starting conversations, reaching out, asking how to get a sales meeting set up just through DMs on LinkedIn. It's definitely to date has been our biggest source.
Yeah. And are you managing all of that inbound yourself, or do you have help?
We have help now. But I write all the LinkedIn content. I write myself. People inside the company, people outside the company ask who's writing that. It's all me. I've been slacking lately, but I had a good cadence. I was trying to do at least 5 posts a week. But got a little writer's block for a bit, but I got to get that picked back up again. LinkedIn's it has a really good flywheel. Like the way the algorithm works is a little bit different than Twitter, and posts stay at the top of people's feeds for longer because not everyone is checking LinkedIn every 10 minutes throughout the day. So stuff is longer lived. And once you get a couple of those big posts, then people the feed will start showing them all your older ones, your newer ones start getting more traction. It's really important to keep that going because once you drop it, like I have in the last month or so, it takes a while to get it back going again.
No, that consistency on LinkedIn, I think, is even more important than any of the other social channels. And that's, I think, that's for, selling into very B2B enterprise, difficult, it was hard for a long time for people to bite off that social media was valuable for companies like that. It's just a bunch of preteens on TikTok. Like, how valuable can it be? But you know what? LinkedIn, it's executives, like the pro. That's all it is.
Yep. I watched this. I learned a lot of this from TikTok. I deleted my TikTok like 18 months ago because I was just spending too much time on it and deleted it. And it took a week to kick the habit, but I've been gone. But there's really great, helpful content on there. And there's one that really resonated with me in like the workforce. As you're selling in, like there's you can send white papers that people are going to forward to their execs, but in every big company, like we've all been part of these, there's always the group chat, the group DM inside of Slack and everything. And that's where the meme stuff, that's where the funny stuff, that's where all of that gets circulated. And then you drop a white paper and then maybe that group that already likes you will forward that up the chain and help get a meeting booked with execs. But you can kind of tailor your strategy both ways and have content for both groups. Nobody sends a white paper to their friend to laugh at, right?
Unless it's a really bad white paper and they're just laughing at you.
We did a hilarious one on April Fool's one year that was awesome. We did one of those that, it was just like a professional white paper, but it was all an April Fool's joke. So you can do both of those.
Amazing.
We try to keep that humor in all of our messaging.
That's great. Yeah. Keep it human. That's I think a big part of it. So you mentioned you're trying to transition to a little bit more outbound stuff as well. So what's going on there?
It's a scaling game, right? We sales and marketing hiring, it's somewhat formulaic and somewhat spreadsheet based on how many people you hire when, based on revenue targets and everything. But salespeople love to just deal with inbound, and that's all they're going to do if you have enough inbound. And so to break out of that, you have to just outpace the inbound you're getting and kind of make it a little bit necessary. But you don't want to go too fast because then you're drying people up on pipeline, and it's hard to keep the team motivated and everything. So it's really just trying to scale it all at the same time and hopefully scale the two levers at the right pace.
So what kind of size team are we talking about at this point? Like how many sales?
So we got way behind on hiring. I think we ended last year with like 2 or 3 ramped sales reps. And this year we're up to like somewhere around 15 sales reps total in different states of ramping, and planning to end the year somewhere around 25, something like that.
That's aggressive. Nice. That's great. So with the outbound, how are you approaching that? Are you just saying like, here a percent of your goal is this, go forth and good luck, or are you tooling them up? Like how are you approaching
Yeah,
that?
we're setting a target, trying to do 50% outbound, 50% inbound, and then we have sales and BDRs, and 50% of the outbound from the sales team is split again 50%, so 25% from the BDR team, 25% from the sales reps. But we know if there's enough inbound, then that's going to be the first one to drop, just because we'd rather close deals that are coming in and taking orders. Everyone would. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So with something like, prospecting, is that being coordinated with the marketing people in any way, or how do you approach keeping those teams aligned?
Yeah, we're starting to transition to real account-based marketing, ABM, that kind of thing. But for us, it's they're really big contract sizes, so it's pretty easy to come up with named lists of prospects, named list of companies we want to get introduced to. Our investors play a huge role there too. Investors are great at that and great at making intros, especially to other portfolio companies or other companies they've met. But yeah, it's when you're dealing with, 6-figure ACVs and that kind of thing, it's a lot easier to do named accounts and targeted prospecting than if you're more B2B or, lower size contracts.
Yeah. Yeah, no. And that's actually, that little offhanded comment about investors being great for introductions. That is a powerful referral channel if you have the right investors, right? So it sounds like you do.
Yeah, it helps. We've had somewhat mixed success with it too. Like just the cold intros to CISOs if they haven't heard about us or anything hasn't been that successful. So we try to save it until we've at least found some other contact in the account at a lower level, something like that, and then you can come in over top and they can help clear the way when a team already has something in mind or something on the roadmap, or it's tied to a priority. That always goes way better than just random cold intro meeting to like a CISO at a Fortune 500 company. And they'll all take the meeting, especially if they like the investors.
Right.
But getting stuff done after that is hard at that level.
Yeah, no, that's a great point right there. Is like you're saving that intro for when you've already started a motion in that area. You're not going to the investor saying, please get us in a new company, and you go and you're just following up, hoping that something's going to happen. It's the extra little oomph to get it over the finish line.
Right. Yeah, that helps a lot, because then it buys the team air cover that you're already working with. It lets the CISO know it's already a priority for the team that they're working on. You're not wasting their time trying to get them to just kick you somewhere down the chain. It seems to work a lot better for us.
Yeah. So that goes back to, I think, a lot of enterprise sales is about dealing with fear of looking like an idiot, losing your job, implementing a tool that nobody actually wants, all that kind of stuff. So when you're producing all this content to make you look like a thought leader, which helps reduce that fear, right?
I hate that term. Yeah.
I know. It's terrible. It's really terrible. Yeah. It really is. How are you reducing that fear for people? Like, how are you getting people excited about this? Like, what is it about your content that does that? It can't be just a meme that makes people laugh.
That's where the product has to come. Right? Yeah, that's where the product has to come in. Yeah. The product actually does have to be valuable. The product does have to solve one of those pain points. You can't. You do need a product to back up the memes. And that's where that comes in. We don't really do product-led growth, the full PLG style motion, but we do have our product has a pretty generous free tier, we call it, where people can kick the tires, teams can play around with stuff before we even sign NDAs. They can get a pretty good familiarity with it, so they're a lot less scared when they come in and actually approach a POV and take a meeting with the sales rep.
Yeah, and that I think is, especially in a technical space where you're dealing with developers, they want to educate themselves.
Yes.
Like, they don't want to talk to the sales rep. They say that I want the documentation. Yes. Let me in the tool, and I want to educate myself.
Yeah. Yeah. So we let them play around for free. They don't even have to sign up just for the free tier. It's segmented pretty well. So we don't lose many deals to the free tier, right? We look at that one carefully. The sales team hates the free tier. They always want to get rid of it. But we track the lost deals to it. It's very, very minimal. And it's segmented pretty well, so people can try it out, get familiar with it, but can't really go run it long-term in production.
Right. Yeah, no, that makes sense. And so on the PR side, right? So you mentioned, you did a lot of Twitter, and there was journalists citing your tweets and that kind of thing. Did you do other stuff on the PR? Like, were you reaching out proactively to journalists or what?
Yeah. We still do that, especially when there's breaking news, breaking stories. I'll write stuff. Our PR agency or team internally will go send it to journalists they think are the best. They'll read it and they'll set up interviews if they want to hear more. It's a big mix.
Yeah. So how do you personally keep up with all of that? Because that's the first thing that, always pops up is like, I'm the founder or the CEO or one of the executives, and I got a lot on my plate. Like, you expect me to do this too? Like, who do you think I am?
Yeah, I just do that anyway. I mean, it's checking Twitter in between meetings, see what's going on, see what other people are talking about, hacker news, just somewhat staying up to date. And then, when I get back into the content, people are like, how do you have time to write all of this? And it's usually just, 5 or 10 minutes in the morning. The shit posting term, somewhat real, sometimes you write those. There's a good, LinkedIn post. Somebody was like, they didn't believe I was writing this stuff myself. And they were like, live stream yourself doing it. And it was like, well, then I have to put a camera in the bathroom. I don't know if anybody wants to see this. That kind
You're going to regret this request.
Yeah. It really doesn't take that much time if you get into it, but once you get rolling.
Yeah. I think I think maybe part of the problem, so I have a working theory that part of the problem of why it takes people so long is they don't have confidence in having something to say.
Yeah.
And the minute you're like, no, I have a point of view, it's valid, and you just have to get it on paper and hit send, it doesn't take that long.
Yeah, the bar is so low. Like you talked about LinkedIn being overwhelmed and squashed. Like, it's everyone out there has a take. Most of them are just, reposting the same thing of like, oh, AI is changing the world. AI is coming, the same kind of boring takes, and it gets filled with that. But just go with something slightly unique. The bar is way lower than you think. If you're a founder, you're a high level executive at a company, people want to hear from you. Like, don't worry, just post stuff. If it's stupid, the algorithm just crushes it. Nobody looks at it anyway. Don't worry about that. Just keep going. And eventually, something will get picked up and people will say, oh, wow, that's interesting. So much stuff that you think isn't even worth writing, that's worth writing because people are going to read it. Somebody's going to say, oh, wow, that's novel. That's a crazy idea. And you're like, oh, man, but I have so many more of these. I could write these all day, once you get over that hurdle.
At any moment, you might shut down your company and just become an influencer full time.
We could do that. Start doing sponsorships.
And that's, to your point, it's a very low bar. And also the downside generally is very low as well, because again, to your point, if it's not good, nobody will see it. Right. It's not that everybody's going to think you're stupid. They won't have even seen it. It'll be like it doesn't exist unless, you really are like a racist, misogynistic person, then you might get canceled.
People that do that,
That's a different problem. That's not that's not a social media problem. It's a you problem. But I think, encouraging people, like you're saying, is as a founder, as a CEO, you're doing something that is in a small percent. Just the fact that you're running a company already puts you in a small percent, and that's valuable to people. And sharing what that experience is, what you're seeing, what you're doing. People want it. People need it. They love it.
Yeah. One of the things I try to watch out for there, like the algorithm loves engagement. The algorithm loves controversy. Like, it's so easy to build a following if you're just going to be negative and shit all over other products and all of that kind of thing. And people talk about like only punching up and making sure you don't punch down. And it's so easy to get pulled into when you see something that starts to work, but just try to avoid punching in general. Like, don't do that. Like, just try to stay positive, try to stay authentic. Don't get sucked into the negativity. That's how you do get people upset at you for this content. It's hard though. You can feel the pull when you see something like that start to blow up, and you want to do more of it, and it will blow up even faster. That's when I try to watch out for.
Well, formerly Twitter, now X. I'll never be able to call it X. I'm sorry, but it's I think my advice to people is always just focus on adding value. Like add value, and it's going to be hard to go wrong that way. So you mentioned, the content that's flooding everywhere about, AI is taking the world, so speaking of, how are you using AI in your day to day?
Yeah, we can't go a whole hour without talking about AI.
It's written into law now.
Yeah, I use it in phases. I was a big ChatGPT user early on, would use it. It really helped me finish content, I would say. Like my writing style, I do a lot of writing internally, externally, all that content and everything like that. Like my style would be like write a super rough first draft, come back to it a little later with fresh eyes, start to flush it out, come back the next day, do some editing, that kind of thing. And it's like having like a pair writer with you, I guess is sort of the way I use it, of like, you can write that first draft and then 2 seconds later have it fill stuff in, and then you correct it. 2 seconds later have it, review your edits. And it's kind of shortened that whole writing and thinking cycle for me into something like that would have taken a whole week, maybe not the same amount of time, but like you can just get through it all in an hour or two and get something done from start to finish. That's really high quality. So I use a ChatGPT. I've been playing around more with Claude recently. The new Claude model is great. Sort of feels like all the ChatGPT writing, it's good, but it's like somewhat formulaic and you can kind of spot it. It uses the same words. And if you're editing it too, which you should be, then you can kind of correct a little bit of that. But it all has some of the same structure. The Claude Opus one, I got Anthropic subscription a couple months ago. I've been playing with that one. I like that one a lot more for writing. I've been using both, trying different things, different places. GitHub Copilot is also a game changer for anyone writing code. I use that. I still write code probably more than I should be. GitHub Copilot's amazing for similar concept. Like you can write a code comment and then it'll just fill in the next 20 lines of code that are annoying and boilerplate and you don't want to write anyway. It's not perfect and you fix it, but at least you're not starting from a blank slate. You're starting from something and improving on it. Those are the biggest two uses, that our engineering team loves it. They use it all over the place.
That's awesome. That's really great. Yeah, I echo the Claude 3, the Opus. Like the it's so much more natural sounding than ChatGPT reminds me of the like overeager social media intern that kind of goes crazy and uses a lot of emojis. That's my take on that. But no, that's great. And then so with the AI, a lot of people are using it for content generation, and you made a comment of you should be editing your post, like not just generating the stuff and hitting publish. Like how much you mentioned like an hour, like you could take down a post in an hour, and some people are gonna hear that and think you spent a whole hour on the post, like oh my god, and other people are gonna be like, I don't think I can do it in an hour. Like, but how do you in your brain continue to justify spending that much time, on something like social media?
The LinkedIn, I'd say 90% of LinkedIn stuff I do is closer to 10 minutes. You just write it in one sitting by yourself. I don't really use AI for that. LinkedIn has the new AI thing automatically. That one's been garbage every time I've tried it.
It's terrible.
Yeah.
Terrible.
I don't like that one. Most of the stuff I just write, maybe read it over once, but just press send right away to avoid getting stuck in like, oh, I'll edit this later and never come back to it. That stuff is usually 5 to 10 minutes, one take, start to finish, and press send. But occasionally I'll get started on one. I'm like, oh, wow, this is like, I think this is going to be a better one. This deserves like a real blog post or an op-ed or something like that, not just the LinkedIn post. And those are the ones that we'll pull aside, have teams review, have teams give feedback on, play around with the AI stuff, and actually spend more time on. But the stats are the biggest one. If you're writing stuff and you get 20, 30, 50,000 views, right? And it's an hour of your time, like a couple minutes of their time to read, but the math still makes tons of sense. The amount of influence you're having that way.
Right. Yeah. And so when you're finding those bigger ones that you're going to spend more time on, what's kind of your system for tracking that? Do you have like a notebook where you're putting the idea that you're coming back to? Is it just a Google Doc?
It's Google Docs. Yeah, my tabs build up. I start them in Google Docs. I start everything with just a list of bullets, usually in like outline form, and then just start filling them in. And then if it's done, then I just press send on LinkedIn. If it's like, oh, wow, I need to go look stuff up, I think this is going to be bigger, then set that aside, work with the team on.
No, that's great. That's, I think, helpful for people to hear. Well, we're kind of coming up on the end here, and I always like to close out with any recommendations you have for the audience.
Oh, yeah. This was also a huge LinkedIn post I did. So sorry if people saw this one, but I did one of these, the purchases I've done that I think I've used the most, changed my life. I got a solo stove a few years ago, completely out of left field. Have you seen those?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's, fire's been around for a while. I thought we were done innovating there, but I guess not. Those things are incredible. Yeah, I got one in the backyard. It's starting to get nice weather again. Excited to pull that back out. throw in some logs, the fire starts up instantly pretty much. You get an amazing fire. You don't have to poke it. You just toss the logs in. There's no smoke. It's one of my favorite products. I recommend them to everyone.
That's amazing. I love that. That's really great. Yeah, a good fire pit. That's a game changer.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, this has been a great conversation. I think there's a lot of value in here for people. Are there any closing words that you wanna share?
Yeah, just the big one. If you're going to get started, you're going to try to do all this stuff. You've got to be real. Authenticity is the biggest one. If you're trying to force it, if you're trying to say the same things everyone else is doing, people notice. We've had competitors that then you can just tell from watching. They're like, oh, memes work for them. Let's try to do memes, and it's just like cringy. You gotta do it for real. If memes aren't your thing, don't do memes. Come up with something real, because people can smell that. I think that's the biggest thing in social media in general.
Yeah.
And also, we're 120 people now. We have a huge team that helps on all of this stuff. So they're a huge part of everything we do. So this isn't just me doing all of this stuff. I got to thank all of them for their work. They do help and make all of this stuff work.
That's amazing. No, very good words of advice. If you're not funny, don't force it. Yeah. It's just not going to end well.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Dan. This has been such a pleasure. And I hope, we can check in another year, see how much more you've grown and what new tactics you've added in.
Awesome. All right. Yeah. Thanks for your time today.
All right. Bye, everybody.